B'Shem Kol Yisrael. So, if you know my style, I love to share the miracles that have happened to every one of us, but in particular in the Israeli wars, I often recount how there were so many miracles. And I want to start a series today where I'm going to recount individual stories because I believe that God is found in the details. And we recount the specific stories that individuals have experienced. You can find a lot of inspiration to find God in our own lives. So today I'm sharing the story in Visions of Greatness, Volume 5, where Yosef Weif recounts it in very great detail. The story of Rav Nisim Chaim Aranov. Rav Nisim Chaim was drafted to the Israeli army in 1971. And he was learning at the time at Yeshivat Porat Chaim, which is, Yeshivat Porat Yosef, which is actually right here in the Old City. It's a very famous Sephardi yeshiva. And when he got drafted, he was concerned, of course, physically, would he survive? But really what he was most concerned about was spiritually. How would he be able to continue as a devout person keeping Torah and mitzvahs, keeping God's law during the hard conditions of the army when most people were not religious in the Israeli army? Certainly back then, it was not a religious environment. And so he did what is advised. He went to a great rabbi, the Gerer Rebbe, the Beis Avram, and he asked the rabbi, please give me a bracha, give me a blessing so that I should be strong. And the Rebbe blessed him. He said, you should return exactly as you came, physically and spiritually shalem, whole. And with that blessing, Rav Nisim Chaim headed out to the Israeli army. His first challenge came on Friday night. He was stationed in the Sinai desert, and most of the soldiers, of course, were secular. After his prayers, he came to do his Friday night meal. He's usually so holy in yeshiva. And he saw people were playing guitar, people were singing secular songs and screaming at him, "No, religious guy, Nisim, come join us, come sing with us." And Nisim just closed his eyes and looked up to Hashem, to God, and said, please, give me a sign that you're here with me. He closed his eyes and with deep concentration, he started singing to himself, Hibanei Amigdash, or rebuild the holy temple. And he sang this for over 300 times until when he opened his eyes, he realized that the entire unit had come close to him, had put away their instruments, and was singing with him. He knew at that moment that God would be with him throughout his journeys. A second incident. Nisim Chaim was very, very careful with all the laws of kashrus. All he ate in the army was fruits, vegetables, a little cheese, some sardines, and that was it. One day, the cook felt bad for Nisim Chaim, and he realized he couldn't eat anything from the pots and pans which were not kosher. And because, again, people in that unit were not strict about the laws of kashrus, and he decided to bake him a cake from new pots and pans which had not yet been used and thus were still kosher. And Nisim Chaim was very moved and very touched by this gesture. He took the cake and he saved it for Shabbos. He put it down by a stone as he waited for the bus to go back to the base. And right at that moment, another soldier swooped off the bus and knocked the cake down onto the sandy floor. And to make things even worse, he thought maybe he could salvage a piece of the cake. A mouse came right then and started eating the cake. Nisim Chaim was a bit sad, and the truth is he started crying about the loss of his beloved cake. But soon Shabbos came and he had forgotten all about his cake, and he welcomed it in with joy. On Sunday, he came back to the base, and his friend, the cook, was waving and screaming and saying, Nisim Chaim, I'm so sorry. What was he so sorry about? See, at that very moment, he didn't realize it, but just before, there had been a party, and hamburgers and cheesecake had been cooked together on those pots and pans, which would make it not kosher, treif. And he was so sorry that he had offered Nisim Chaim not kosher cake. But Nisim Chaim, of course, saw the divine hand, smiled and hugged the man and said, God saved me from eating non-kosher. God is here with us, watching over us in every step. One final story, although there are many. Nisim Chaim's unit was stationed in the Sinai desert, and they saw real action. They saw real war. One day, they were stationed right next to an Arab army, and there were battles. And at one point, the Arabs had the better hand, and his unit ran 130 feet underground into a bunker. And they started hiding away, hoping that they could survive the onslaught. And it was intense. Tons of shooting. And the bunker was not meant to last so long. They were already there for days. Their food had almost ran out. There was almost no water. And they knew it would just be hours or minutes before their end was near, before the onslaught would continue, and they would see their end. Nisim Chaim was prepared for this very scenario. He had borrowed 25 pairs of tefillin, of phylacteries, prayer, what we use for our prayers, and he put them out, and he told everyone, listen, don't despair. God is here, and whether we live or die, let's die and live as Jews, as proud Jews. Let's put on our tefillin and pray that God should save us. And 24 out of 25 of them were convinced. As they say, there's no atheist in a foxhole, and this was certainly a foxhole. They started putting on the tefillin, and one man said, what? I'm going to put on tefillin? My whole life I lived as an atheist, and suddenly I'm going to start praying? Right as those words left his mouth, a shrapnel penetrated the bunker and took his life. The rest of the soldiers understood the message. They started putting on the tefillin. They started praying. And the afternoon turned into night. The night turned into day. They're still waiting there, not sure why they were still alive. 2 days later, they were pulled out by the Israeli army. Miraculously, the Israeli army had knocked out the Arab army. It had taken them 2 days to dig down into the bunker. But ultimately, all of the soldiers were saved. And of course, the impression of the power of prayer had never and will never leave them. These are just some of the amazing miracle stories that Nisim Chaim recounted in his service. He ended his service. He went back to the Rebbe and said, your blessing has been fulfilled. I come back shalim, whole, spiritually and physically. May we all be blessed to see God in our lives. Have a great day.